My name is Jesse Hensel, and my paper is titled Warriors of Living Traditions. My paper focuses on the work of Guillermo Gómez-Peña and Ann Fienup-Riordan. Gómez-Peña is a Mexican-American performance artist. Ann Riordan is an anthropologist who works in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta with Yupik people. Gómez-Peña was born in Mexico in 1955. Here we see Gómez-Peña as a 7-year-old in drag. This was just the first of many performances. In the late 70s, Gómez-Peña studied at Cal Arts. This image shows Gómez-Peña in what he often calls his first performance. He is in an elevator where he stayed for an entire day to see the reactions of people who would come in and out of the elevator. Another of Peña's early performances involved walking from Tijuana to Los Angeles, where he was going to school. Gómez-Peña's work often is made at the border or in response to ideas of the border. This image documents Gómez-Peña's 1985 piece, Border Action 2. And here we see Gómez-Peña's 1994 piece, Cruci/Fiction. Gómez-Peña currently lives in San Francisco, where this piece was made, and has both Mexican and American citizenship. Gómez-Peña defines himself as a performance artist. He says performance art is not theater, it is not comedy, it is not poetry, and it is not strictly sculpture. However, all of these genres can be seen in his work. Ann Fienup-Riordan has a doctorate in anthropology from the University of Chicago. Initially, she worked as a traditional anthropologist, collecting oral histories and living with and observing Yupik people. But later, she began working with local people to preserve the traditions they wanted to preserve in ways that were acceptable to them. This image is from Nushagakayak between 1906 and 1908. It shows a person wearing a mask as well as wooden extensions over their hands. Mask dancing was greatly discouraged by early missionaries, and in many villages it was at least temporarily eliminated. Here we see 3 caricature masks collected in Kasigunuk in 1946. These masks were used in dances to ridicule specific people and thereby reinforce cultural norms. Gómez-Peña uses humor in his work to ridicule contemporary U.S. society and expectations of Mexican and Chicano identity. Humor continues to be important in the Yupik area. Here at the Kamai Festival in Bethel in 1994, a man dances with sunglasses and a Halloween mask. Ann Fienup-Riordan worked with Yupik people to try and bring masks back to the Delta, at least temporarily, and to revitalize this living tradition. This process included bringing Yupik elders to Berlin. Here we see Frank Andre wearing snow goggles at the Smithsonian in 2003. Also at the Smithsonian, we see Gómez-Peña performing The Shame Man and the Mexicant in 1993. And in 2000, we see Gómez-Peña in the Museum of Fetishized Identities wearing goggles that are surprisingly similar. Here we see Yupik people in 1904 in a papier-mâché display for the St. Louis exposition, followed by Gómez-Peña's 1992 performance, The Couple in the Cage, in Madrid. Gómez-Peña calls this type of performance reverse anthropology. In my paper, I argue that as anthropological critique, it actually becomes anthropology. Here we see Gómez-Peña in 2003 at the Tate Modern exhibition Live Culture. Gómez-Peña displays himself as an ethno-cyborg. He describes the ethno-cyborg as 1/4 human, 1/4 technology, 1/4 pop culture stereotype, and 1/4 audience projection. Gómez-Peña includes technology in the recipe for the ethno-cyborg because of the indigenous and impoverished communities that are left behind the digital divide. We see Gómez-Peña in 1997 with an ethno-cyborg persona, El Mad Mex. Fienup-Riordan highlights technology in a different manner, focusing on the traditional and contemporary science of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. This image shows a motorboat prop made out of bone. Here we see historical materials being used to fix contemporary technology. Fienup-Riordan also shows the inverse. Here we see a harpoon with a plastic float. That would be contemporary plastic fixing a traditional tool. Though not highlighted in her book, Lawrence James Beck's Punk Walrus also dovetails these ideas. Like Lawrence James Beck, many of Gómez-Peña's materials are pre-made. The objects he uses in his performances may be discarded after use or broken through use. This image is from Gómez-Peña's 1987 performance, Tijuana, Niagara. Similarly, Yupik masks were also often discarded after use. When traders came to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, they picked up these items and brought them back to their countries of origin. Here we see a display from the Museum für Völkerkunde in Germany from 1926. Masks taken from Oceania, Alaska, and Africa led to artistic revolutions in Europe, including Cubism and Impressionism. Here we see Joe Friday discussing masks in Mountain Village for the dance festival when many of these masks were brought home. Here we see Gómez-Peña in his 2008 performance La Otra Sagrada Familia. In 2008, Gómez-Peña came to Alaska and performed at Out North in Anchorage. The performance was reviewed in the Alaska Dispatch by Smith, who described it as blowing her mind and searing her heart. He said, "Being in Alaska is like being without a context. You have the sense that you are on the edge of something, an ultra-periphery, where everything is up for grabs and anything can happen. And perhaps this allows for a very particular form of eccentricity, unlike any I have ever encountered, a sort of American magical realism." For Gómez-Peña, the border is a rich space to critique contemporary U.S. society, and therefore heal the bodies and people it has damaged. Whereas Fienup-Riordan has moved away from critique and wants to let the communities present themselves and thereby heal themselves in their own way and in their own space. Images for this presentation were taken from Ann Fienup-Riordan's book, The Living Tradition of Yupik Masks, as well as The Way We Genuinely Live. Images of Gómez-Peña's work were taken from the website of his collective, La Poca Nostra.